Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast. Recording this on September the 10th, which means tomorrow is the day that the All Whites will destroy the USA in a game of football. Hopefully, maybe. Might have to wait and see because they did lose 3-0 to Mexico, and we'll be chatting about that later on in our football section. Got a couple of signings to discuss. We got the Kate Sheppard Cup, we got the Chatham Cup, and we got all sorts of Kiwi football coming at you later on in the podcast. Of course, plenty of rugby league to chat through as well. And Blackcaps are playing Test cricket against Afghanistan in India, but they didn't actually play on the first day. So we'll I don't know what we're going to talk about there, but the Blackcaps are in a bit of a Test cricket phase. We've also got a bit of county championship cricket, and who knows, today during the podcast, the White Ferns T20 World Cup squad may be announced during our recording, and I'm going to put it out there. They got a new selector. Shout out to Sarah Sukigawa, former White Ferns cricketer. She is now the selector for the White Ferns. New selector, same squad is my prediction for the T20 World Cup squad for New Zealand. And you were covering this, I remember you asking me about this before. It seems like Ben Sawyer is just the White Ferns coach indefinitely now.
Yeah, that's right. Because there was a thing about how, when we're doing that thing about looking up his T20 domestic records and how he keeps losing games. And although I don't know how I haven't checked in on how he's gone in the 100 this year. I know he lost the first couple, but then I know he got a couple wins. So did they
They had
look
a
all right
couple
there?
more losses, so yeah.
Yeah, so
And
I
Sophie
think that means another year
Devine,
without making the finals of whatever competition he's coaching in. So.
Sophie Devine wasn't very good as usual under Ben Sawyer.
Which is not to be underrated aspect of this as well, I think. As she heads into what'll be a final tournament as the T20 captain, I think is how that's working, but she's going to stay on as the ODI captain, which seems doesn't really matter how it seems, I guess, at this point. Yeah, no, but there was this thing about I remember looking that up about Ben Sawyer, and when he was announced, it said he had a contract through until sometime in 2024. It was like a 3-year contract or a 4-year contract or whatever they announced, but that if that was to the date of when it was announced, like that many years to that point, then it should have expired like 3 or 4 months ago. Presumably, you wouldn't change your coach, even one who's not doing this well, that close to a T20 World Cup. You'd at least like get through the T20 World Cup and say, well, we've been building towards this. We're gonna, we're the train's on the tracks. We gotta see this one through. But they're also talking about him like he's working with the new selector, like that's just a permanent thing as well, which seems like his contract should be expiring at some point. Like at the very latest, you can say it would be December 31st, 2024 should be the expiry because that's what they said. And there's been no announcement of any kind of extension. And frankly, the idea of any kind of extension would be insane. Like there's not a lot of evidence to say that they're working in the right direction, but maybe they just didn't want to announce it because they didn't want the backlash. I no idea what's going on there, but he seems to just, yeah, he seems to just be the emperor now instead of the coach. I'm not sure.
The emperor of losing cricket games,
Yeah.
the one and only Ben Sawyer. I don't think there'll be any changes for the T20 World Cup squad, but it is important to note at this stage that the chief selector of the Blackcaps, Sam Wells, he made a bunch of changes, and there's been a pretty drastic shift in how Blackcaps squads are being selected. So maybe a new White Fern selector, Sarah Sukigawa, will have a similar impact on the White Ferns, but along with the Ben Sawyer coaching situation, it would, like, you can't really do too much a couple of weeks out from the T20 World Cup, which makes you wonder why things didn't change well before that, when the White Ferns were losing a lot of games under the one and only Emperor of Losing, Lord Emperor Loser Ben Sawyer. We are from the niche-case.com, where you can read about some Aotearoa sporting matters if you like a bit of reading. You don't have to, but if you can read, if you like a bit of reading, you can head on over to the niche-case.com. Got an NRL Wahine spotlight on Tatiana, Finau and Sarina Masaga, two youngsters from Auckland. We got the Aotearoa Kiwis mixer that's been updated. We got deep dives into the Kate Sheppard Cup and Chatham Cup finals. That's on our website. We got the check-in with Auckland FC and how their pre-season mahi is going. If you like a bit of basketball, you can still check in with the Kiwi players who are lining up for NBL Australian teams, Australian NBL teams. We've got an early guide to the women's domestic cricket summer. The New Zealand versus Afghanistan Test preview still applies. We've got a couple of deep dives into domestic cricket on the men's side. It's all there for you on our website, theniche-case.com. And if none of that tickled your fancy, but you still love a bit of reading, you can sign up to our free newsletter that comes out every Monday and Friday via Substack, theniche-case.substack.com. And that is full of Aotearoa sporting information. And we also do our bonus podcast every Thursday that is available for the folks on Patreon and anyone with a paid Substack subscription. So you can support the Niche Case straight up the guts through Patreon or with a paid Substack subscription. And we offer an extra podcast every week in conjunction with the mighty Niche Cast, which is hovering around 2 hours of Aotearoa sporting kōrero on a Tuesday, published Tuesday evening, Tuesday afternoon, and then we double up with the bonus podcast every Thursday, coming up just over an hour of Aotearoa sporting kōrero, and that is strictly for the folks on Patreon and with a paid Substack subscription. Everything else is just out there, and if you can't read good, make sure you're tapped in with the podcast, because that's where we just chat through a lot of the things that are on the website, a lot of the things that were in the newsletter. So we're out here. If you can't read good, it's all good. No whacking furries. You can have a little listen. And if you're just a superhuman who can read good, who can listen good, hey, we're here for you. We're across all the platforms. And if you're a little Generation Z who can't sit through 10 minutes of stuff, there's a lot of sporting clips on the channels as well. So that's all there for you if you want it. We always start our podcast with a dose of mindfulness. What do you got, old mate?
Got a dose here, an appropriate dose here from the psychedelic novelist, Mr. Ken Kesey. He was actually sort of a novelist and then he was a psychedelic dude, so I'm not exactly sure on the timelines there, but
novelist, psychedelic.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, to get it chronologically right, yeah. He wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is bit of a classic. And I'm reading his second book at the moment, which is potentially even better. But there's a long quote here, but I'll just read the start of it, where he says, "The answer is never the answer. What's really interesting is the mystery." And then he adds some stuff about how people look for answers, think they've found the answers, and then because they think they found the answers, they stop looking. And then because they stop looking, they're no longer curious, they're no longer interesting, they're no longer finding, great details in the world around them and all this and blah, blah, blah. You can extrapolate that out, but yeah, the mystery, not the answer. Questions, not solutions, I guess. Question marks, not full stops. Let's go with that.
A little bit of grammar. Unfortunately for, plebs like myself, maybe you as well, when you're not in your psychedelic novelist baggy, unfortunately for us, the mystery isn't very helpful. The mystery doesn't solve any of your problems. The mystery doesn't necessarily make you feel better. In fact, I'd say the mystery makes you feel worse, because you're just diving into the pool of unknown. You're just going into the abyss, and not much happens in the abyss. Nothing moves very fast in the abyss. It's all quite slow motion, and it's all just airy fairy mystery, and you're just like, what is going on? Then you start looking for answers while you're in the mystery, And obviously, your mindfulness always hits a nerve with me. You're right on point with the mindfulness that you delivered. So as I'm talking through it, I'm thinking somehow, some way, you got to embrace the mystery, but also find some level of comfort in the mystery. And I imagine once you find some comfort in the mystery, that's where you learn the most about yourself and your situation, and that's where the magic happens. I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah, I don't think anyone ever really quite fully gets there. But the mystery is the mystery is the present. That's the now. That's the reality, right? The answers are like a hypothetical thing that you're assuming is out there somewhere, but isn't necessarily. So like you're searching for something, you're reaching for something rather than being present. Part of the rest of that quote, he adds the job is to seek mystery, evoke mystery, plant a garden in which strange plants grow and mysteries bloom. The need for mystery is greater than the need for an answer. Which, yeah, it doesn't feel that way, but I think that's like it feels like you need answers, but then the fact that you need answers means you're in the mystery, which is where it's interesting, I guess. I don't know. That's where the strange, what did he say? The strange plants blossom. Strange plants grow and mysteries blossom. Bloom. Yeah, bloom. There we go.
If those strange plants are just slightly easier times, that would be fantastic. So that's what we're doing in the mysterious zone. Let's chat through a couple of bangers because a couple of bangers have dropped on my side. There's a new song from Fat Freddy's Drop, Next Stop, and it's apparently off their new album Slow Mo. There you go. Talking about Slow Mo, Fat Freddy's Drop, their new album Slow Mo. And there's also a couple of new tunes from Mellow Downs. Got a sick little collaboration with the one and only Clendon's Finest Dead Forest and also Dera Milan. They got the High Vibration, and that comes after, or that, yeah, that was before the release of Mellow, Calm and Chill, which was produced by Hyan. So Mellow Downs is coming at you with collaborations with Dead Forest, who's a sick little rapper, but he's done a lot of collabos with Dera Milan, and Dera Milan and Hyan, they are quite funky, kind of garagey. I'm not very good with the music, so a little bit of garagey, a little bit of up-tempo, just funky production. So it's cool to see Mellow Downs getting all up in that. Mellow, Calm and Chill is with Hyan, and then High Vibration is with Dead Forest and Dera Milan. Couple of Aotearoa bangers for you. What do you got?
I'll throw up a couple of new albums from American kind of uh it's I don't know where you draw the line. I'm also struggle with trying to come up with the right descriptive words for music. I don't know where to draw the line between indie and alternative, but MJ Lenderman's got a new album, Illuminati Hottie's got a new album. Both of those artists are like uh, they've carved out a nice little space for themselves over the last few releases that they've had, and these albums sort of feel like culminations of the identities that they're building for themselves. So like more confident, more assured, better production, really strong tunes, great stuff there. I will mention as well. Let's mention Kiwi country singer Tammy Nielsen as well. He's got an album called Nielsen Sings Nelson, which is a Willie Nelson covers album. Tammy Nielsen is fairly well known, spectacular voice. Not really in my usual scope of listening. I don't mind the country stuff, but hers is not necessarily the what falls inside my scope. That's just how it goes. But Willie Nelson very much is. So I've only heard one or two of those songs, but I will listen to that because uh, you know, Willie Nelson is just a great human being, and he wrote some outstanding songs, and I want to hear a Kiwi take on those. The other one I'll mention is Troy Kingi, because Troy Kingi's on his, like I mentioned this album before, is Leatherman and the Mojave Green. This is where he went to the Mojave Desert, apparently did some mushrooms with his all-star band, made an album inspired by Queens of the Stone Age, lots of sort of chunky guitar riffs and pretty heavy, noisy album. I liked the album. I'd heard it before, liked it, mentioned it on here as the singles are coming through and whatever. But he's on his little national tour at the moment, so he played in Whangarei because he's one of the few sort of nationally renowned artists who will actually play in Whangarei because he's from up north. He grew up in Kerikeri. So I went and watched that, and hearing the songs live was just a different vibe. And he had the same band that was on. He even made a TV show about his little journey, I think, which is some was like TVNZ on demand or something like that. I haven't watched it yet, but um, yeah, he had his Red Hot band, which included Ezra Simons from who's the drummer for Earth Tongue, who's a band I've mentioned also this year. They had an album come out a few months ago, which was awesome. But he plays guitar in this group, so he's just a little bit of a jack of all trades. Um, yeah, there's just hearing those tunes a little bit looser, a little bit louder, a little bit more just like feeling that live energy, tapping into that gave me a greater appreciation on his album, which felt like a good one. And now I'm thinking, actually, this is a great one. Like this is up with the best stuff he's done throughout his 10-10-10 series. So Mr. Troy Kingi doesn't miss. He's a human being with an aura as well. He walks into the thing, he's got like his poncho on, he's got his like fancy desert hat cap thing going on. He he walks past and well, I mean everyone paid to see him, so I guess that's a different that's maybe to be expected, but like he captures the attention. He's a hell of a leading man up on stage.
Beauty. The Blackcaps. So the Blackcaps haven't got any play in their test against Afghanistan. Didn't even get a toss, which means we didn't even get a team list. So we got no idea which Blackcaps team is playing. And just a quick little Google of the Greater Noida weather. How about this for some concise weather descriptions? Tuesday, today, where we're hoping for the test to start. The forecast is thunder shower. Wednesday, the forecast is scattered thunderstorms. Thursday, thunder shower. Friday, rain. And there's just a couple of days after that of rain. So I'm not sure, as per Google, what the difference between a thunder shower and a scattered thunderstorm is. The point here is that there's lots of rain around the Greater Noida area. And I am not optimistic that we're going to get a whole lot of cricket played if yesterday it wasn't really raining and let's just say Aotearoa was a bit better at the old drainage than some other countries. So first of all, take a little bit of gratitude. Like I think Aotearoa, our ground staff are just awesome. Our grounds, our cricketing grounds are awesome. Football stadiums behind you, rugby stadiums, they're all excellent. They've got excellent technology. The pitches are good for cricket as well in Aotearoa. So first and foremost, take a little bit of gratitude for how Aotearoa does their sporting thing. Second here, not overly confident of cricket being played throughout this test. I imagine like this is why we do have 5-day tests. So if you lose a day, you still got 4 days, right? And if you lose 2 days, you can still have a result in 3 days of cricket. But when you go, we only want 4-day tests, well, then you're shortening the window for the possibility of action. If you've got a 5-day window for test cricket and it's finished in 3 days, oh, good, no wakanwharis, say it again. It's probably twice, and I don't use that reference anymore. But if you've got a 5-day test window, then you're accounting for all the mishaps and possibilities, bad light, bad weather, bad drainage, whatever it is. So not too confident, but yeah, just the annoying thing is we didn't even get a toss, so we didn't even get a team list. And I was most fascinated about the team list because I was curious about the balance between selecting, it's basically, do you select Tim Southey and Matt Henry, or do you select Tim Southey and Will O'Rourke? Do you select, I'm not too, I think Tim Southey's going to play. I think he'll play this test and then he might miss other tests later on as skipper. But maybe it's Matt Henry and Ben Sears for a one-off test before they get into the World Test Championship, balancing doing that stuff and the need to win, the need to get a bit of confidence in Blackcaps playing Test cricket. So we didn't get any of that. So I don't know what else to say.
I did read somewhere, it might have been on Cricinfo, on just like scratching for updates throughout the night, about how like they mentioned like every now and then the players go out and try do some warm-ups or whatever, and they said that Santner, Bracewell, and Phillips were out there rolling the arm over, which I mean might suggest that those three were in line to be the spinners that they picked on what's expected to be a spinny deck, or at least before it got drenched. It might also mean they weren't playing though, and they were just out there getting reps because they're not preparing for the game. But or it might just be completely random that everyone was just hanging around and those three guys just got bored and wanted to go do something. So I don't know if that really means anything or not, but I did see that somewhere on the thing. Along with, are you aware of this trend on when the Blackcaps play? The Cricinfo like live scoring, and they'll get comments in, and someone or a group of people or whatever, or maybe it's just like unconnected things, just everyone going for the same joke, but people keep sending in comments about the Blackcaps with under names of serial killers. Like there'll be a David Bain comment, and there was one yesterday I saw, it was from Mark Lundy, I looked it up because it said something about like, I don't like the rain and my beloved Blackcaps being delayed, but at least the delay allowed me to rush back home to Palmerston North. And I looked up Mark Lundy, and he's like killed his wife and daughter 20 years ago. And it was a thing about how he like rushed back to Palmerston North to like cover his alibi or something. But yeah, there's this trend on the Cricinfo comments where people keep doing that, and there's a David Bain one often pops up, and there's various ones like that, and I don't know who does this, but I noticed another one yesterday. So keep up the good work, whoever's serving those up, because obviously the Cricinfo moderators, they don't know, they're not aware.
That is quite funny. Like, it's obviously sad because they're terrible people. Not the commenters, the people the commenters are impersonating, they are terrible people, but it's quite funny. And another observation, there was a photo of a couple of the lads walking around the pitch, probably getting their socks wet, and they were kicking a steed in. It was actually Tim Southern. He's just like kicking a steed into himself. So it's an important, like, we are a rugby league podcast, and the Blackcaps are using a steed in, right? They're not using a Gilbert ball. They're not using a rugby union ball. They're using a steed in ball. And I'm going to take that opportunity to segue into some rugby league because it just fits the theme. Like, the Blackcaps have opted for the Steeden as their rugby ball of choice at a time when the New Zealand secondary schools champions on the boys' side, St Thomas of Canterbury, for the second year in a row. So a high school in Christchurch is undeniably the best rugby league school in New Zealand. Like, people usually, like, I'd say this is only a recent development. Even last year, after St Thomas of Canterbury won the championships last year, you could still say, like, what are St Paul's, De La Salle, they are big rugby league schools now in Auckland. Shout out to De La Salle College. They've been on the rise with rugby league. A lot of great young players coming out of De La Salle College. St Paul's has been the traditional rugby league powerhouse. But now you've got St Thomas of Canterbury, back-to-back National Secondary Schools champions. Like, you just can't argue with it. It's undisputed, undeniable that a high school in Christchurch is the best rugby league school in Aotearoa. And so that's notable. And obviously we've got the immense growth in rugby league in Christchurch, right? The Warriors play there. It's a seller always. They're playing international test footy down there later on. We've been big on the rise of rugby league in the South Island as well as just the Canterbury Christchurch region for a long time now. So that's just the solidification, the crystallization of that theme and that idea for myself. On the girls' side, Southern Cross Campus are champions. And Southern Cross Campus, a school in Mangere East, they got old Maliho Funga as a former student. And they've got Lavinia Tauhalaliku as a former student. So the school that produced those two players, Tauhalaliku, has now played 2 NRLW games, and Maliho Funga is an absolute legend. That school is the national champions on the girls' side, which seems quite notable. So you could say that they are the best women's rugby league school in New Zealand right now. And of course, Southern Cross Campus, that's where Lekahalasima went, and he was probably still at school while he was playing New South Wales Cup footy. So there's a couple key ideas there, but we also had a bunch of NRLW debutantes this weekend. As I mentioned, Tatiana Finau and Sarina Masaga. Tatiana Finau is a Point Chevalier junior who's also got connections with Mount Albert. She made her debut for the Raiders. Sarina Masaga is a Howick junior. She went to Howick College, Howick Hornets junior, and she made her debut for the Titans. Tatiana Finau only played 6 minutes, so it was hard to get a gauge of what she did, but she had a couple of powerful runs, and that was... The Raiders had a couple of funky wins over the Dragons, but we'll peg that for later. She was on the field in an epic comeback win for the Raiders. Big try for Amelia Pasikala to seal the win. And she also looked to want to start a scrap at the play of the ball, which was always a good sign. Sarina Masaga, she was playing for the Titans, and the Titans, they lost to the Eels, and they should have defeated the Eels, but the Titans just looked terrible. They were just camped on the opposition try line, couldn't score any points. So it was a bummer for the Titans. But Sarina Masaga, she was their most threatening player. She had 10 tackle breaks in her debut. And that was the most for the Titans. And if you consider how players like Anessa Biddle, Alexis Taueniai, Lavinia Tauhalaliku, how those young players from Aotearoa have entered NRLW and performed at a high level straight away. That just reaffirms the standing of women's rugby league in Aotearoa. So you've got as I was saying last week, you've got the big Donnies, Stacey Walkers, Tanika Willisons. They're coming into the NRLW as Black Fern 7 superstars. But the strength of women's rugby league in Aotearoa is more evident in how the young players who grow up playing rugby league, how they are stepping into NRLW, because they're operating at a very high level. Like Anessa Biddle went from playing for Counties Manukau, playing for Aotearoa, and on the women's circuit in Aotearoa. Next season, she was dominating for the Sharks, and she was playing for the Kiwi Ferns straight away. Alexis Taueniai, she made her NRLW debut at 18 years old. Now she's 19 years old, and she is, Anessa Biddle's first for post-contact meters said that for ages. Alexis Taueniai, she's one of the best offloaders. She's first or second for offloaders. I haven't checked the stats this week, but first or second for run meters. She leads the Dragons for tackles. She's doing all of that as a 19-year-old. And I actually think the Taueniai family is pretty ridiculous because, to the best of my knowledge, Alexis was playing for Wellington and Wharapama Cup. She might have been 16 or 17 years old. Younger sister Trinity Taueniai, she made the Australian schoolgirls. They are Wainui Mata juniors. She made the Australian schoolgirls, and I think that's at the same time as she's got her development contract with the Dragons. This isn't just mediocre scouting or mediocre indicators of talent. These are young wahine from Aotearoa who are dominating. And part of that foundation is Southern Cross Campus winning the National Secondary Schools Tournament on the girls' side, and how easily the youngsters are debuting in the NRLW. slide back to St Thomas of Canterbury, and you do see it like a few times. You see reporting around the National Secondary Schools Tournament, and they'll say like, "Oh, there's scouts everywhere," and like the pesky side of me is like, well, there's been scouts everywhere at that tournament and every other tournament, Māori tournament, youth tournaments. There's been NRL scouts for at least 10 years. Like, I mean, Joey Manu was scouted from the secondary schools tournament. So was Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Like, that goes back a wee way. Like, it's not a new development that NRL scouts are at these events. A new development may be that a lot of the players are already signed to NRL teams. So you've got someone like Albert Balkin. He was playing for the Bulldogs earlier this year. Now he's come back and he's playing for St. Paul's College. Like, stuff like that is happening where a lot of the players at the secondary schools tournament, they are already in the NRL system, which brings me to someone who I think has a pretty sound argument, solid case to be the best youngster in Aotearoa right now. And this isn't based on like me watching the footy. This is based on just like what happens, what's the results, what's the like where does the player play. And Lennox Tuiloma, who let me get this correct. I think he's a Hornby. I think he's a Hornby junior. Who knows? He might be related to Bill Tuiloma. Oopsie daisy, I searched Horny instead of Hornby. That's an awkward one. Lennox Tuiloma, he's a Linwood junior, sorry. And he has played in back-to-back St Thomas of Canterbury teams who are national champions. And he was starting lock for the New Zealand Warriors under-17s team who won the Harold Matthews Cup competition. And this dude's pretty interesting because he's not like the quintessential New Zealand Rugby League prospect who's bigger than everyone. But he's starting 13 in these teams, but he's not overly big. Like, he's just quite fast and he's aggressive and he's powerful and he wins. Like, he's part of the St Thomas of Canterbury dynasty, and he was part of the New Zealand Warriors under-17 team who won the Harold Matthews competition. So Lennox Tuiloma is someone to watch out for. He is in the Warriors system to the best of my knowledge still, and he is an absolute force in the junior ranks in Aotearoa. Similar degree is someone who fits the mold of a quintessential Aotearoa Rugby League prospect, Emmanuel Neal. Because that dude is massive and he's mobile. He was named in the New Zealand Secondary Schools under-16s team. And he was MVP of the whole tournament. So after this competition, after this tournament, they named an under-16s team and an under-18s team. There are a bunch of St Thomas of Canterbury players in the under-18s team. No disrespect to anyone I'm not mentioning. You're awesome. You're dynastic. You're doing great things. There's just a few key wrinkles from this tournament with Lennox Tuiloma and Emmanuel Neal, who was a starting edge forward for St Thomas of Canterbury. He was the tournament MVP, but he was under 16s. And I'm pretty confident that he played in the St Thomas of Canterbury team last year that started the back-to-back run as well. So those are some key indicators, not only about the talent in Christchurch, but I think both of them are part of the Warriors system, so it's a good indicator there. But this is Aotearoa Rugby League in 2024, the best high schools from Christchurch, and some key players in Aotearoa are from Christchurch as well.
That's kind of fascinating because this has been a trend that you have tracked and explained to me on these podcasts for, at least a year, but potentially a fair bit longer because there's NRL players from the Canterbury region who didn't just walk into those teams yesterday. You know, they've had journeys themselves that have taken however long to get to this point. So this is not something that's happened overnight, but I also think the average rugby league fan in this country might not necessarily think that like might not necessarily notice this trend that's been going on. And I don't know. I'm curious why it is. Or like there's a couple of obvious ideas. One is that this has been a dominant region for rugby union for a long time, and you've got enough players. There's spillover into rugby league as well, and that's Auckland has been the same for generations. There's similar, like players go back and forth. Players play both at these high school ages, so it's not even a competitive thing. They're just playing in first 15s and first 13s, and probably winning a lot in each. There's also like, because I think the rugby league's based at, it's called Napunawai, I think it is, the big sort of facilities that they have there. I think there might be artificial pitches and there's a bunch of fields. And I know this place because there's been a few National League football games that have been played there as well. And that seems kind of awesome. I know it's Lincoln, I can't remember, wherever it is, where the Blackcaps now spend a lot of their off-season stuff training. Like there's been so much chat about like the lack of a major stadium in Christchurch that maybe it's overlooked how many other like excellent nation-leading kind of facilities they have for other sports. So that's probably part of it as well. But is there anything else to this sort of Canterbury Rugby League rise that has been happening?
Shout out to Cal Stadium as well, the basketball
There you go.
arena, home of
Yeah.
the back-to-back champion Canterbury Rams. Peep the trend here. So that the
Yeah.
first thing is maybe just Canterbury's awesome. But one thing that stands out to me is just I believe rugby league in the communities around Aotearoa has grown exponentially. So it is a Canterbury focus, but you go to other regions like, Bay of Plenty, Rotorua, South Island, West Coast. They have, I think there was maybe a narrow victory for Canterbury over the West Coast in the men's premiership over the weekend. So West Coast Rugby League is back in action. Otago Rugby League is up and about. But all the Kiwi-NRL juniors, they're coming from around the country. So there is this kind of dominance of Canterbury. And of course, Auckland is what it is. But, throughout the regions, rugby league is thriving, men and women. And this is the thing about rugby league. Any of these tournaments, respect to Aotearoa Māori Rugby League because they are separate to New Zealand Rugby League and they do a lot of great work with their tournaments. But all these tournaments, they have a better and stronger connection to the community than rugby union. And I think that is the foundation of rugby league in Aotearoa. So we don't necessarily like to put that rugby league versus rugby union, but just in the specific bubble of rugby league, the only context I can offer it is my hunch and my belief that all these age grade tournaments, the Māori tournaments, the schoolboy tournaments, the schoolgirl tournaments, they are bigger, better, more vibrant than their rugby union counterparts. Like the structure of rugby union in Aotearoa, there's no national tournament. It's like you've got the top four, or you've got the quad tournaments and all these things. We don't like have 40, New Zealand Rugby League, I think they wrote it. Let me pull it up to get some facts and figures, because they had a bunch of teams, 30, 40, don't think it was quite high as 50 teams together. So the New Zealand Rugby League release, obviously New Zealand Rugby League, they're going to talk it up, but they've got 3,500 players taking part and a record 49 schools. So I imagine there might be 49 teams, because it goes 21 teams in 2022, 38 teams in 2023, and then we're up to the 49 figure. Like that doesn't happen in rugby union. So these are the foundations. These are the things below the surface that are happening in communities around Aotearoa that propel rugby union forward. And it's also worth pointing out, like you mentioned a couple of the South Island players, Griffin Neame, he's from the West Coast, Jordan Ricky's from Christchurch, Jermaine Sako's from Christchurch, but you've also got players like Tanner Stowers-Smith, Makai Tafua in the Warriors system at a New South Wales Cup level. Sasaya Alatini is a Hornby junior who's with the Bulldogs, and he was amazing for their SG ball team. Like, come to think of it, Sasaya Alatini and Lennox Tuiloma are very similar. They're not huge, but they are very fast and very powerful, and they seem to tickle the intangible boxes. Lennox Tuiloma plays in the middle. Sasaya Alatini plays on an edge. So my takeaway, I believe, is rooted in the foundations, the grassroots community section, because throughout Aotearoa, the age group tournaments, the local competitions, men's and women's, it's all growing quickly. And there's a far stronger connection to the community than what you have in rugby union. And that seems pretty ridiculous to say, but I mean, not to big up myself here, but I've been talking about this for a long time, and we're starting to see it come to fruition. And I mean, it'll be pretty crazy if the Canterbury Super Rugby team, if they don't necessarily thrive over the next few years, rugby league is well positioned to just come in. They're already there. But to overtake the kind of rugby union dominance in Christchurch, which would be massive. But I mean, St Thomas of Canterbury are back-to-back champions, so you could argue that that's already happening. There has been a bit of Warriors news as well. What I think we'll do here is we'll chat through a few Warriors wrinkles, then we'll get into NRL bottom 8 and any other NRL chat with the Aotearoa Kiwis mixer in our minds as well. One thing I've kind of, I don't know, it's kind of cringy. We had the big farewells, right? Like Shaun Johnson retiring, Jazz Tavanga, he hasn't been offered a new contract. For Noah Blake, he wants to go back to Australia. So that was all like front and center. They get the big celebrations. Then you go to the awards night summary, acknowledgements, departed players. Shaun Johnson, Jazz Tavanga, Adam Whenua Blake. At the same time that news is coming out that Marcelo Montoya's on the outer. Like they're trying to shop Marcelo Montoya. And we've heard about Bunty Afoa for a few weeks now. So it's like the Warriors are doubling down on celebrating 3 departing players. Meanwhile, there's other departing players who aren't getting any acknowledgement, right? Like there was no celebration about Bunty Afoa, and maybe the Warriors didn't necessarily, maybe they waited until the end of the season to tell Marcelo Montoya, if you get a better deal, you can go somewhere else. But maybe Marcelo Montoya also, the agents, the managers, they're working hard behind the scenes, so they might catch a vibe. They might look at the salary cap. They might look at the depth that the Warriors have and catch the drift at the where the winds are moving. Think, I might be on the outer here, but there's no celebration about Marcelo Montoya. There's no celebration about Bunty Afoa. It's just kind of weird, kind of cringy, kind of goofy when you consider how over the top the celebrations have been for these departing players, when there's other players who are constantly in the news about departing who didn't get any of that appreciation, love, or support. On the Marcelo Montoya news, the Warriors, I was thinking about this as well, like Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, and I've alluded to this before, he might not be your favorite centre. Fair play, it's all good. I'm not going to try to convince you that he's all right at centre. But Roger Tuivasa-Sheck plays at an 8 out of 10 level at fullback, wing, and centre. That's what makes him Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. That's why he is who he is. You might have centre as his worst position, but he's doing the same footwork. He's making the same meters. He's doing more tackling at centre, and he doesn't pass at fullback, so he's not going to pass at centre, right? Like, it's the same stuff. He's not going to pass on the wing. He's not passing at fullback. He's not passing at centre. But he's going to give you 8 out of 10 in any position every week. That's who Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is. So if you are allowing Marcelo Montoya to go under the imaginary idea that maybe Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's going to move to the wing, he's going to still offer the 8 out of 10 mahi. But the Warriors have plenty of outside back depth. Didn't write it down here, but I got it fresh in my mind. Let's see if I can conjure it up from the depths of the mangroves in my mind. Ali Leotawa, Rocco Berry, Adam Pompey, Moala Graham-Telfer, Edward Kossi, Sio Kelly, Motu Pasikala. They're all there. They can play wing, they can play centre. So, and all of the thing here, as we've talked about before, young players, they are cheaper. So all those dudes, even like a Rocco Berry, Adam Pompey tier player, they'll be cheaper than Marcelo Montoya. So now you can see the logic of the Warriors, where they're like, we've got 3-4 other options for these positions who are all cheaper than Marcelo Montoya. Kind of makes sense. So that's how I see that playing out. And we also had the Warriors signing Erin Clark. So now we've got that confirmed. And another little observation, because I've talked about, well, first an observation about speed, right? We're big on the speed. The Warriors don't have a lot of speed. They might get more speed. We've talked about that. You get Erin Clark, Tainto Apiki, Luke Metcalf, maybe Moala Graham-Telfer. Suddenly you're injected with speed in a variety of positions. The Warriors, I think they had 2 losses against the Bulldogs in the back half of the season, second half of the season. And the Bulldogs have had 2 losses recently. They lost to the Sea Eagles and someone before that. I'm having a blank, drawing a blank. Let me make sure we get this right. Wrote it down. Did I write it down? Cowboys. Cowboys and Sea Eagles, they got a bit of speed, right? Cowboys, you're looking at a Drinkwater, you're looking at a Valentine Holmes. Sea Eagles, where do you start? Saab, he might not have even been playing. Tolu Kula. Like, there's a lot of speed around the positions of those 2 teams. So when thinking about the Bulldogs losing, they've come up against 2 teams who have a lot of power. They've got a lot of big boppers, but they're also fast. And the Warriors struggled in their matchups against the Bulldogs this year because they're not fast. Erin Clark's fast, and he's coming to the Warriors. He's probably going to play in the middle forward, prop, lock. But a couple of insights here from the 2 Andes. And what have I said about the 2 Andes? I've talked about their time at the Warriors previously, where they might have learned a lot about what doesn't work for the Warriors. So who do we have here? First up, we got Andy McFadden. He says, one of his quotes here, the start of his career didn't pan out the way he planned. And then we've got Andrew Webster. Erin was coming through our NYC system when I was first here and was a player with lots of ability. It didn't work out for him initially. So we've got the 2 Andes, 2 different Andes, who are basically overseeing the Warriors right now. They both refer to their previous stints with the Warriors when Erin Clark was coming through the system. That strengthens the idea in my head that they are trying to implement lessons learned from when the development system wasn't working as well. So shout out to Erin Clark. He's now joining the Warriors. Another observation here. To be honest, I've got like 10 different observations, but Finau Blake, he leaves the Warriors. That was a, compassionate grounds. Got to get back to the whānau in Australia. Compassionate grounds. The Warriors have just signed James Fisher-Harris and Erin Clark under compassionate grounds. They were both under contract, right? Do we have any information? The Warriors don't have that there. Let me just pull this up. So we can, and to be honest, the players who are leaving the Warriors are all Australians. We know the James Fisher-Harris situation. He was under contract with the Panthers, got a release on compassionate grounds, wanting to get back to Aotearoa, be near his family. The Titans announcement. Clark has been granted a release from the remainder of his contract on compassionate grounds. 26-year-old had a year remaining on the coast. However, he is requested to return to New Zealand with his young partner and family. I don't doubt the desire to be around your family. Don't doubt the compassionate grounds, but I do find it interesting the Warriors have made 2 signings under the umbrella of compassionate grounds. So, and if Marcelo Montoya does leave the Warriors, another player I'm curious still about is Dylan Walker, because we had an unreliable rugby league journalist, of which there are many, suggesting that Dylan Walker wanted to go back to Australia kind of under the similar premise. He wanted to be closer to his family in a compassionate ground sense. But I want to update the list of Warriors departing players, because we've got Jazz Tavanga, we might have Bunty Afoa, but we had Josh Curran, Bailey Sarina, Ronald Volkman, Adam Finau-Blake, and Marcelo Montoya. So they're all Australians. You can't quite say that they were replaced by Kiwis, like Fisher-Harris is coming in, Erin Clark's coming in, they're both from Aotearoa. But at the same time, the Warriors have signed Kurt Capewell. And you've had other arrivals such as Jackson Ford, Ben Farr in reserve grade, Mitchell Barnett, obviously Luke Metcalf. But that gets into a murky section where I don't know, like Mitchell Barnett, Luke Metcalf, Jackson Ford. I'm not sure if they were signed under the 2 Andes or if they were signed under the previous regime prior to the changes that happened. But Kurt Capewell was a 2 Andes signing because he joined after year 1 coming into year 2. And of course, we've got all the halves who are young Australians. Luke Hanson, Jet Cleary, Jesse Sorich, Talon Egan, Jack Thompson. So a couple of observations there. You got any thoughts about any of that? Sorry. I'm going to interrupt again. A couple more. So we had Moala Graham Telfer. He did the New South Wales Cup double. So he was the player of the year and he was the player's player of the year. I don't think Moala Graham Telfer was that bad in the NRL. Ali Leotawa's had games where he kind of missed every tackle. Like, these youngsters, they're going to have bad games, they're going to have good games. But the more they just roll through the consistent grind, I reckon they're all good. I reckon Moala Graham Telfer has a lot to offer the NRL team. And that belief I have is now reaffirmed by him winning the New South Wales Cup Player of the Year and the Players Player of the Year for the New South Wales Cup team. That seems like a good sign for him. But there was also Eddie Iramia, someone I've talked a lot about. He was named New South Wales Clubman of the Year. I don't necessarily know what that means. It means he's just the GC. A good lad. But he's 19 years old, which I don't have a date of birth for Eddie Iramia, but I think if he's 19 years old, he would have been under 19 SG Ball eligible earlier in the year. But he only played New South Wales Cup. Didn't even bother with under 21s. But when he did play under 19 SG Ball last year, he won the SG Ball Clubman of the Year award. So Eddie Iramia from De La Salle College, in 2 years, he's won the Under-19 Clubman of the Year and the New South Wales Clubman of the Year. That might be like a good sportsmanship award, but I don't think it is because Eddie Iramia, he's playing three different positions and he's playing every game. Like, this isn't just a regular youngster. This is a youngster who is 19 years old. He's playing prop, centre, and edge forward, and he's operating with such mana that the two teams he's played for at the Warriors, because he hasn't played under 21s, he's only played SG Ball and New South Wales Cup. The two teams he's played for, he has won the Clubman of the Year award. That seems like a really good indicator of a high quality NRL prospect. Now, I think I've got all of that off my chest.
But is Eddie Iramia, is he fast? I guess it depends which position he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, he's fast enough to play centre as a prop. So he's probably fast enough.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Because I think that's such a... Yeah, that... If you're quick, you just... Like, as a team, not just as a player, but as a team, if you have pace, if you have speed, the game moves a little bit faster, you're a little bit more dynamic. The opposition has a little bit of a harder time just covering, sliding, making tackles, and doing all those things, getting back, retreating to the 10 meters, whatever. And it seems like a small detail, but it also seems like the kind of thing where that's one of those examples where a small margin makes a huge difference. And the Warriors, it's not just that you can look through their players and point out the way we have done that they lack pace, that they lack sort of, elite speed in across the various positions. As a team, they just felt slow as well. Like, as a team, it felt like there were things where, and sometimes that's not always just like how fast can you run. It's hand speed and it's thought speed and all the various different types of speed that we've been logging.
Leg speed.
Leg speed, of course, is an important one. AKA speed. They just, they felt like a team that was just a little bit plodding, and that might be to a 95% level of their opponent, but that is enough to lose you games, or at least enough to maybe spin an outcome by a single try or something like that. And we know how many close games they lost where a single try would have turned matters in the other direction. So that does seem like a very obvious thing where they would try to, a very obvious target for next season is let's get faster. And they have players below first grade who can do that. So a lot of these guys who mentioned don't know what they'll do recruiting wise, but Erin Clark, as you say, is pretty quick for his position. And also looking at players leaving, Marcelo Montoya is not particularly fast. He is a powerful winger. He is a strong, big body type winger. He's not a lightning pace guy. And I don't know. Would you say Dallin Watene-Zelezniak's fast? He seems like someone who's fast over a long distance, but he's not really fast off the mark.
I'd go the other way. I think he is
quick burst and slower over.
Because I've said what I've said, but when I watch Dallin Watene-Zelezniak run into the defensive line, like, he's running fast.
Yeah.
He's not jogging into the defensive line, and that's what makes you a cult hero.
He hits the line hard.
Is how fast you run into the line. Like, you watch Nathan Brown at the Sea Eagles, he's a cult hero because he steams into the defensive line. I think, he's a winger, so he's fast.
Mm.
But I don't know if he's fast for a winger, but he is fast into the defensive line. Yeah, that's the best way I'd say it.
Yeah, like, wingers are always going to be amongst your quickest players. You just lined your squad up on the 20-meter line and said sprint to halfway. Your wingers are probably going to win that race more often than not. But yeah, there's a lot of fast wingers, and there are lightning fast wingers at other clubs that would outrun someone like that. But I don't know. That's why I ask, is because I can't quite figure it out with him. I don't know if it's just the flying mullet or, or what it is, like the aerodynamics. It's just I can't tell if he's a fast winger who's just looks slow or if he's a slow winger who looks fast or whatever. But he just seems somewhere in. Maybe that just means he's in between. Like he's an average paced winger for an NRL winger.
I think he's a footy athlete. Like,
Yeah.
he is very athletic. And
Well, you see that in some of the tries he scores, the finishing,
exactly.
the put downs, you know.
And steaming into the defensive line shouldn't be overlooked. Like, as an indicator of your athletic ability, if you're sprinting into three men, like, you're doing well. You're doing well from an athletic perspective. Just like a wrap up of the Warriors. So this year we've had, so the Warriors last year, they had an under-19 SG ball team. They had an NRL. They had a New South Wales Cup team. They had an NRL team. This year they started an under-17 and an under-21 team. So they've basically gone during the pandemic. They had an NRL. They had one team. Last year they had three teams. This year they had five teams. Next year they'll have six teams, maybe more if they invest in like a women's reserve grade team. Warriors in the NRL, bit of a dip. Warriors in the New South Wales Cup, because the New South Wales Cup team did lose to the Panthers on the weekend, so their season is over, and it wasn't quite as good as last season where they went deep into the finals. This time they lost their first finals game, but I think they're holding steady. Like, they finished the season in fourth. Last season they finished the season in third. They were 14-1-9 ahead of finals. 14-1-9. This year they were 14-1-9. That's a bit weird. So they had the exact same season. But they finished one spot lower on the ladder, and they also got knocked out in finals. I'm not too worried about that. I think the New South Wales Cup team's just holding steady. Remember, they held steady as one of the best New South Wales Cup teams with two different coaches and a lot of juniors. So that's a good sign. Things were a bit iffy in the Jersey Flegg. So Jersey Flegg, they finished 11th. They were 8-1-15th. SG Ball under-19s, they were 12th. They finished 12th. They had a 3-1-5 record. Somehow, every Warriors team had a draw. Let me check in with Harold Matthews, because of course the Warriors are Harold Matthews champions. They went 5-3 during the regular season before going on a steamroller through the finals. So somehow Warriors under-19s, under-21s, New South Wales Cup and NRL all had a draw. That's just weird. So the best way to view the Warriors, under-17s, amazing. 5-3, win the grand final, excellent. Under-19s, under-21s, not the best, but ultimately those two teams produced players for the New South Wales Cup team, and the New South Wales Cup team was good. NRL team, we've talked about the issues for the NRL team, and we've talked about their season a lot. But as I talk through this, I find clarity, crystallization of my idea, where mediocre seasons for the SG Ball and Jersey Flegg team need to be viewed and through the lens that a lot of those players went to play for a good New South Wales Cup team throughout the season. And yes, a bunch of SG Ball players were playing New South Wales Cup. Like Motu Pasikala, Sio Kelly, two of the leaders there. And if the Warriors like have like Tanistella Smith, Eddie Iramia, Jacob Laban, Leka Halasima, they could play SG Ball. Maybe. Like Leka Halasima's not even 19 years old, so he could definitely play SG Ball. So the best under-19s, the best under-21s weren't playing those grades, and then the dudes who were playing those grades week in, week out, a lot of them did go into the New South Wales Cup team that was good. So when you look at the Warriors' bigger picture, the first year of under-17s, they won that grade, so that's a good sign. And of course, they had Lennox Tuiloma and maybe another one was Isaiah Savia, who was a hooker from St Thomas of Canterbury. I think they were the main dudes who started the under-17s final. So great under-17s team, mediocre in under-21s and under-19s, but those teams produced talent for a good New South Wales Cup team for the second year in a row, and then we had the NRL team doing whatever they were up to. We did have a couple of funky results with your Dragons. The Corey Horsburgh grubber. That was hilarious to hand your Dragons a loss on the men's side. And then the Raiders, the Dragons are kind of down buzz in NRLW aside from Alexis Taueniai being amazing, but they kind of fumbled that game as well. Like it was, they had the same performance where they were the kind of the better team throughout the whole game, and then they just fumbled the last 10 minutes. But the good news on the women's side was that Amelia Pasikala scored an awesome try for the Raiders, and she is back in action for the Raiders because she was awesome last year in the NRLW with Roosters, and then she was awesome in her Kiwi Ferns debut. But soon after scoring an awesome try for the Kiwi Ferns, she suffered a major knee injury. And now she took, obviously had to take a break to get better. She came back into the Raiders team a few weeks ago. And then she scored one of the winning tries against the Dragons. Don't think we've got a lot of time for NRLW, so I'll just leave that there. But looking at the bottom 8, I talked about the Tigers last week and how they kind of suck. Like, this is a strength of the NRL competition. If your wooden spoon battle can attract the sellout crowd, I mean, you're doing all right with your competition, you know? I mentioned last week that the Broncos vibe could get very bad if they lost on the weekend. And the Warriors, they finished their season with a good win over the Sharks. They had their farewell party for 3 of the possibly 5 guys who are leaving. But that's it. Like, the season's over for the Warriors. They had a win. Even though the season kind of stunk, they leave the season on a positive note, all honkadory. Broncos shit's hitting the fan. So I think that's a nice little measuring stick for the Warriors. Like, measure them against the Broncos and things aren't as terrible as they may feel. Obviously against the Tigers, it's pretty good as well. How are you feeling? You got any Dragons thoughts?
No, because after last week, I just couldn't get myself interested in what they were going to do this week. Because I mean, they were out of finals unless there was a draw between the Knights and Dolphins, and the Knights won that game. Low scoring game, so it was in draw territory, but didn't happen. Only Warriors teams get consistent draws, apparently. When you really need one, you can't find it. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was still driving home from footy when that game was on, and I haven't got around to watching a replay or highlights, and I don't think I'm gonna find the motivation. You got to watch out
you got to watch the Corey Horsburgh.
Okay, I'll check the highlights. I actually haven't even, to tell you the truth, I haven't even got around to the highlights from the almost comeback against the Eels as well, because that it's the sort of thing where it's like, I should watch my team score 5 tries in 10 minutes, but also, do I want to watch my team absolutely throw away their finals berth at the same time? Like, not really. So I don't know. But if the Eels scored 100 points in their last, or more than that, 104 points in their last 2 games combined, and they needed to do that in order to not finish last. So I don't know exactly where that came from, but Dylan Brown was a big part of that. So it was, at least there was something. At least the Dragons did something for Kiwi-NRL.
Until Dylan Brown got injured. That might open.
And they're in agony behind you on
as the fireworks go off. Yep. I still think the best Kiwis halves combination without Dylan Brown is Kieran Foran and Jerome Hughes, and we've also had an injury to Brandon Smith, which opens the door to Jeremy Marshall-King as the main hooker, and then you can, like, the dudes in these positions have very curious eligibility stuff. Like, you're dealing in the Kyo Weeks. He's a Māori, so he's going to play for New Zealand type of situation, which I don't know if that's going to be the case because he was born in Australia. Phoenix Crossland can play in the halves and hooker. He was born in New Zealand, but he doesn't really have much of a connection to New Zealand. So there's a few curious eligibility things to watch out for. I'm big on Dejan Arce. I'd love to see Dejan Arce get a crack for the Kiwis. He did play for Samoa last year, so he's got that option as well. And just quickly on the Eels and the Dolphins. Eels, fascinating spot. They got a lot of Kiwi-NRL players who may or may not be moved on with the coaching changes. But they also have, you hear a lot about the Eels and their local catchment area, the biggest catchment area and all this stuff. We know the local catchment area is a myth because every NRL team recruits from Aotearoa. And one of the players you need to watch out for in the Eels system is Te Huranui Twiddle. He's a Turanga Waiwai junior who, like Dylan Brown, as soon as he joined the Eels, one of their best players. He was like fullback for the SG Ball team, fullback for the Jersey Flag team, filling in the halves. I think Te Huranui Twiddle can spend time with the Eels NRL squad if he's still in the mix with the change of coach. The Eels also have Javan Stevenson Halla, who's a big bopper from Palmerston North. So right there, theme of the podcast, I've mentioned a dude from Turanga Waiwai and a dude from Palmerston North. Javan Stevenson Halla, he initially spent time with the Roosters, but then he switched to the Eels, and he's played a lot of, I think he started in SG Ball this year, played a lot of Jersey Flag. The Dolphins. Again, theme of the podcast, we've got an expansion team here, and the Dolphins, in the NRL team, they've only got Isako, the Bromwich brothers, Jeremy Marshall-King. We had a bit of a slide with Valence Tefare. He's just got brushed aside for the season, but he did score 2 tries for Redcliffe in their finals game this weekend. But below that, the Dolphins love Aotearoa as well. You got Elijah Rasmussen, who's a big bopper who went to Westlake Boys High School. He could be in the mix for an NRL debut next year. John Whinianganofo. He's awesome. He's another one of these players who made the Australian schoolboys fresh after moving from Aotearoa. He's from Auckland Grammar School, and he played on the bench for a few games for Redcliffe and Q Cup this year. He might be like 19 years old, maybe 20 years old. He's a very powerful halves hooker, and his family's awesome at rugby league as well. Patrick Kailahi went to Hamilton Boys High School. He's a really good edge forward, could be a middle forward. He's rising through the Dolphins system. And of course, they recruited Tafita Nofahu from First 15 Rugby. Well, all of these dudes play First 15 Rugby, if I'm being honest. But Tavita Nofahu played for the New Zealand schools team this time last year, and he had a great season in Mal Meninga Cup, and he's someone who could quickly rise through that Dolphins system as well. And the good thing about the Dolphins is their new coach, Christian Wolf, unlike Jason Riles at the Eels, who's coming in to make a whole bunch of changes, Christian Wolf has been working there the whole time. So he knows all these Kiwi-NRL juniors at the Dolphins system. He's probably going to promote them from within, and the Dolphins should not be overlooked as a Kiwi-NRL sneaky powerhouse. I'd go there, sneaky powerhouse. No White Fern squad as of yet, so I'm still refreshing the pages, and if it doesn't drop for the podcast, we won't worry about it. Otherwise, we'll see what happens at the end of the podcast, because now we need to check in with the All Whites, who they did lose 3-0 to Mexico, and you had a nice I'm trying to find it, but I don't know if I can. In the newsletter yesterday via Substack, thenishcase.substack.com. Here you go. The Ferns seem to be getting ripped for all of this, whereas the All Whites don't, but it feels like the blokes are catching up and the bad reputation stakes. Not sure how to feel about it, to be honest. Accountability is good, permanent negativity around our national teams is bad. Somewhere in between is the zone of productivity. And that seems relevant, pertinent after the 3-0 loss to Mexico. Because as you also suggest, highlighted in the newsletter, New Zealand's ranked 94th in the world right now, and Mexico is 17th. So, maybe our positivity is just insane. Because the straight up and down rankings of it all, Mexico's 17th right now via FIFA, and USA is 16th. So there's literally no grounds for me to be optimistic about a win over the USA for New Zealand. It's just me having a giggle, to be honest. Haha, we might beat the USA. Ooh. But straight up and down, USA is ranked 16th in the world. Mexico is ranked 17th in the world. And it's the same for the football fans, where they're usually losing and rolling out kind of mediocre performances against better teams, but there is this expectation, whether it's from footballing folk, whether it's from non-footballing folk, there is an expectation for New Zealand to do something in international footy. And by do something, I literally mean do something, like score some goals, have some fun, get a draw, get a win maybe, just do something cool. Because usually, unless they're beating up on weaker opponents, they don't do much cool stuff. There's no razzle-dazzle footy. There's no just entertainment, really, to be honest. But those are some bigger picture ideas that we need to kind of wait to see how the USA game goes. What did you make of the loss to Mexico?
Well, I mean, you remember the football ferns did win a game at the World Cup last year. And then after the World Cup, everyone talked about what a disappointment it was because they didn't get out of their group stage. It's well, they did one thing they'd never, ever, ever done before that no New Zealand senior team, they always haven't won game. They've been to 2 World Cups. They didn't win any of those games. We celebrated the time they got 3 draws at a World Cup, which and rightfully, that, it sounds like a punchline, but that was actually a great achievement. That was cool as they didn't lose any of those games. But yeah, that thing about expectations does seem that's something that I'm trying to reckon with at the moment. Is what we want to see a national team that improves on what we've seen from them in the past, because they just seem to have a better, stronger, deeper team, squad of players to be able to choose from, men and women. This applies to football ferns as much as the All Whites, and that's one of the things. Another thing I'm reckoning with is the ways in which the All Whites have just become the football ferns. And I think that reputation is catching up with that. And for a long time, I've been talking about how it's unfair the way the football ferns get talked about. And the last year or two, I've started pointing out, well, actually, they always kind of do the same stuff and don't get the same critique. But now I think we're getting to where they're getting the same critique as well. They've just become the same entity. The only difference yet is I haven't heard people complaining about the All Whites picking the same players, even though they don't, the way that the football ferns was the case. I guess at least people are in a little bit more acknowledgement that the All Whites are bringing through a younger generation, whereas the football ferns did it a little bit more subtly and then still got criticized for not doing it, even though they were doing that. Is another thing I've been writing about for a while. Well, they're not short on narratives, these 2 national teams.
Ooh, don't like the word narrative, so you might need to update that.
Not sure on storylines.
Now, for some reason, I hate the word narrative because it's literally the only word people use.
Cliche at this point. Yes, I agree.
What you're saying about the football ferns there sounds exactly the same as the Blackcaps. While people were complaining about the Blackcaps being too old, they were literally integrating younger players into their system, and then to the point where they gave more opportunities to young players and people started complaining about there not being enough older players.
Why'd you get rid of Neil Wagner for?
Exactly. So it's this weird, I don't know, that seems like a force that we are constantly battling up against, is the perception and reality of these teams. And it's pretty deep in the football ranks at the moment, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, the football ferns don't have Ria Percival anymore. They don't have Abiosig anymore. There's look at play like Hannah Wilkinson got dropped for the Olympics. Ali Riley is battling injuries and might have played her last international games. We don't know yet. Like there's a Betsy Hassett wasn't around. Like there's a Annalie Longo hardly played at the Olympics. There's a lot of these players. Erin Naylor's not in the picture anymore. Like there's so many of them. But I'll also point out that the results haven't got better or worse. It's kind of the same. Moving on to, and maybe that's what people wanted to see, was at least try something, get some younger players in, but also the younger players aren't necessarily going to make you better from day one. That takes a little bit of time. And as I always say with the Ferns, and it's true with the All Whites, like the development happens at their clubs. It's just about getting as many players with good clubs as possible and hope that falls back into the national team. The All Whites feel like they're ahead of the football Ferns in that kind of just that process, but we've not seen anything results wise. Like they've had one win under Darren Baisley. It was against China in his second game in charge. It's a nice win. Like, it was a good solid win. That Chinese team was pretty terrible, but they got a draw and a win. They were the only home games I think they've played under Baisley, because they haven't even. Well, they will have some more later on this year. We are playing Malaysia in the next international window. Got a home game against Malaysia, and then one of our World Cup qualifiers, and there's another window later in the year which will be more World Cup qualifiers. So losing 3-0 to Mexico, the result doesn't. Who cares? They're way better than us. Like, of course, they're way better than us. The rankings tell you that. Normal logic tells us that. Their country is way bigger. They have way more footballers. They have a much stronger league. They go to World Cups and they make knockout rounds at World Cups. They're just the history is on their side. Like, just everything points towards Mexico is way better than us at football. We shouldn't be upset about losing to them. And I'm not upset about losing them. I am a little bit upset about just the fact that I'm not seeing a lot of ideas out there. We know they have this problem about struggling with creativity, but even with the football Ferns, with their struggles with creativity, at least you got ideas of what they were trying to do to get around that. Like there was a lot of wing play, I think, with the Ferns is something that they've been trying to get going. Set pieces have been a strategy. I mean, the All Whites just sort of, I don't know, there's been talk since they started bringing in they sort of had a refresh of the squad around the COVID time, because that's just a lot of things had refreshes, because you had a couple years where there just weren't international games. So when you come back, it's a little bit of a reset button. And there's a lot of talk since then about how they're playing better football and wanting to be a team that passes around more. But then also some of the goals they conceded against Mexico were pretty brittle, and they were going to concede one way or another because they were just under a lot of pressure against a better team. But like, I don't know. I've got similar vibes about the under-20 women's team at the World Cup as well, where it's like this team cruised through Oceania qualifying, scoring so many goals and looking like one of the best attacking teams we've seen in age grade levels with some of the players that they had there, especially once they added Millie Clegg in as well for the World Cup itself. But they couldn't get to that point because their defense wasn't very good. And that's always been such a even though they got good players, that was the weird thing. They got good defenders. I think physically there was a bit of an aspect there with that team, that under-20s women's team, was they weren't as good athletically as some of the teams they played. They weren't, so they were getting beaten by speedy wingers and running in behind. They just can't keep up the pace, or a lot of set plays, aerial stuff where they're not winning the headers because they're just a little bit shorter or not as strong as their opponents. Some of that stuff. The strength and size shouldn't apply to the All Whites. I do think maybe they have a bit of that Warriors lack of pace about them, is true, but I don't know. It's just, I'm not seeing a lot of solutions to issues there, because they're not even necessarily playing to the strengths that they have in the team, which I guess is the point to make. And the football Ferns, I think, have done the same thing as well. They're trying to build up from the back a little bit more, trying to be more courageous, more just aggressive with their passing, but at the same time, you can't lose the thing that is their reputation worldwide, which is that they are going to be a physical team. They're going to be defensively stacked. They're going to be difficult to break down, and you're going to know you're in a battle when you're playing against the football Ferns. I remember when America came here last year, a lot of the American players were talking about this. I'm like, this is America. They don't even have to give us Like they've been the best women's team. We caught them actually on a little bit of a dip there, but they seem to be back now after winning the Olympics. They have a very good coach, so that always helps. Um, Perhaps that's an idea to come back to around the All Whites and Football Ferns is the idea of coaching. It might be an aspect to consider. Although I'm not, I'm reserving judgment to some extent on some of those things. I'm not sure how much of it is coaching, but I am starting to think with the All Whites it might be a little bit. There might be something that's holding them back a little bit. Even though I don't know, my idea with international football is simplicity is better. Just having a simple game plan. You don't have time to get complicated about things anyway. You barely have time to train together. And someone like Baisley, who's just a well-liked guy, he won't try to do too much. You just set the guys up, let them take some control over how they want to play as well, and just wind them up and let them loose. Is normally the better aspect for international coaching, but they're a little bit lacking in imagination at the moment, the All Whites. But these games against Mexico and USA aren't necessarily the ones. If we don't beat Malaysia at home, I think that's where we start thinking, okay, we got some problems. But yeah, I can't remember what the other point I was going to make about it. About playing to their strengths and stuff. Like that's the identity, and that was definitely the identity of the Football Ferns that the American side were mentioning. Is like if they've taken note of it, they don't have to take note of the Football Ferns. They could just turn up and win without doing much scouting at all. They're better in that way, like to that extent. But they've noticed a reputation there. They've noticed some kind of pattern. So if that's taken hold, that's the kind of thing you kind of want to keep that around. And when the All Whites went to the 2010 World Cup, it's Ryan Nelson and Winston Reid and Simon Elliott and Ivan Viselich and guys like this. Like that was their identity too. Is they were going to win those 50 tackles. They were going to be defensively solid. They were going to do all that stuff. I'm not sure we've got that to the same extent with the All Whites. And I wonder with the All Whites and Football Ferns if maybe they're in a counterintuitive way. Maybe they're trying to play a little bit too much football, which isn't the problem so much as you can't do that at the expense of this existing identity. You got to do that alongside this because there's room for that as well. You can be a strong, dominant passing team who also crunches blokes and tackles. You can do those things. But these are just ideas I'm pondering, thinking about this after watching the All Whites lose to a much better team. So it's really not the time to be making exaggerated conclusions or anything. It's probably best just to jot these things down, think about them, but we'll wait for more evidence before we snap into stuff.
You talked around the US women's national team observations about the Football Ferns. Like, do you have anything specific there?
Well, I think it's they're not throwing out specific ideas. I remember there being a focus on them saying sort of like being a little bit diplomatic after winning 5-0.
Yeah.
What do you think of the contest? It's like, well, regardless of the score, we know a team like New Zealand is always going to give us a battle. It's going to be tough. They're going to work hard. They're going to make us earn it. That kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like physicality, work rate. We might not be better footballers, but we will at least throw out 100% effort and make you work. You're not gonna get anything for free. I'm seeing both teams at the moment conceding not a lot of goals. Defensively, they're still pretty good, and I think the Football Ferns actually, we saw at the World Cup, they were defensively outstanding, so they can peak for the occasion. But I think we've seen both senior national teams conceding some softies in recent times, which is not a trend you need to see continuing, really.
Sounds like they don't have an identity, which is the same issue that the Blackcaps have, same issue that the White Ferns have. So that's a key aspect. But like
those teams, there is an identity there. They're just not quite embracing it. Like there's a blueprint. You just gotta, don't forget where that blueprint is.
Yeah, it is weird because the Blackcaps were uber successful playing like super duper Kiwis, and what you're saying about the All Whites, they were pretty damn successful playing like super duper Kiwis, as limited as it was in a footballing sense. That's how they were relatively successful. You shared a all's well because Canelo Alvarez was at the game.
Yeah.
And you shared a nice little screenshot of Canelo Alvarez next to Michael Boxall and the Mexican captain and the officials there. You also shared a nice screenshot of Julius Halaifanua
Hmm.
standing next to Stephen Adams, and I'd say he's maybe an inch taller than Stephen Adams.
I think maybe even two. He's and looks for like a 17-year-old, whatever he is. He's bulkier than Stephen Adams was at that age. That dude is a unit. And that photo, which was from Stephen Adams, shared it himself on his Instagram. That could be a famous photo in a few years, if Halafanua goes on to do similar things as what so he goes on to follow the pathway that Stephen Adams has sort of carved out ahead of him. That is going to be a photo that we look back on and be like, there's the past and the present, or the present and the future as it is currently. Like, that was a cool image. And I also noticed he tagged it in Georgetown University, where Halafanua is going to be attending this year, even though he was named in the FIBA under-18s Asia Cup squad, and he still is on that squad and getting DMPs on the thing. He seems to just be in a completely different country. So I think that explains why he wasn't popping up for that for the junior Tall Blacks and the Asia Cup under-18s. But they did actually get thrashed by Australia this morning. But that team was awesome, carrying on just a trend of New Zealand age grade basketball teams doing really well at these tournaments this year. They were crushing teams on the way to their final, finished second at the Asia Cup. They only need to make the semis to qualify for the under-19 World Cup, which is happening next year. They made it all the way to the final. Second time they made the final of this competition. They were thrashed by Australia, but Australia just dominated everybody at that tournament. They were winning by like more than double the score of their opponents. So no shame there. They were the second best team, and they were fantastic throughout. Who Have you got the thing there? I think it was Kata Hopoi and Tama Isaac were the two standout players scoring most of their points. So Tama Isaac actually would have seen a little bit playing for Canterbury in the Sales NBL this season, where he was pretty good in a bench role for a player who's still playing under 18s international basketball, and his older brother Kaya Isaac just signed as a development player for the Breakers this season.
Let's swing back to the football, where the Phoenix have made a couple of signings. They apparently upgraded Matt Sheridan and Alby Kelly-Heald from scholarships to full professional deals. What do you make of those moves?
Well, I don't know why Matt Sheridan got the big focus on all the promo stuff about it. It's like, we've upgraded Matt Sheridan to a senior contract. Oh, and by the way, Alby Kelly-Heald too. Like, Alby Kelly-Heald is probably going to be the backup goalkeeper. So I've been predicting that one for a while, especially once they signed Dublin Boone to a scholarship contract. It's like, we don't need two scholarship goalies with only one on a senior deal. Like, you might as well give Alby a contract that reflects his status in the squad. So that has happened as expected. I didn't necessarily see Sheridan getting the same gig, but there you go. He's pretty much same as Kelly-Heald, has set himself up as the backup to Oluwaseyi, the new import goalkeeper, English import goalkeeper. Same as he's the backup there. Matt Sheridan has probably emerged as the backup to Tim Payne at right back. He got a few appearances last season, a couple, I think he made one start, maybe a couple off the bench. He didn't play a lot, but he seems like a player who's got big reps within the club, like a lot of these top scholarship academy type guys that are coming through. There's a lot of players that they seem to have singled out and be like, yeah, these are the good these guys are talents who we see progressing into the A-League. And this is how that's supposed to go, right? Is they elevate a couple guys every year, they sell a couple guys, they replace them with a couple more fellas. So great work from Sheridan and Alby Kelly-Heald getting their contracts upgraded. There was a note as well in the Phoenix press release about that, the article on the website about how like the Springs, that doesn't change their number of players. They're still at 22 because they were both on scholarship deals. No, they're both on professional deals. But there was a note about how they have, I think it's 18 of their 22 players on full pro contracts and 4 scholarship players, which I don't think is true. They have 22 players, but I had them counted as 5 scholarship players, and they've just upgraded 2 of them. So I think either that's a typo, or maybe there will, well, whether it's a typo or not, there will have to be another 4. I'm pretty sure you're supposed to have 4 scholarship players at a minimum. So someone else is going to be stepping up and replacing that, and that'll be quite interesting to see, because there are quite a few little candidates who could be the next one up from the academy. I would imagine they probably go towards a defender, because their scholars, as it is, they've got 2 attacking players, Brooke Smith and Sloan Rodriguez, and they've got a goalkeeper in Dublin Boone. So I'd imagine you probably want a defender. Maybe Dylan Gardner might be an option. Jaden Smith, Seth Karunaratne. Like, this is what I'm saying is there's no shortage of candidates who might be contending. There were about 4 or 5 other players who were involved in that Australian Cup squad without scholarship or senior contracts. So it's not like there's I'd say it's next man up, but it's not like there's one next man. There's a queue there for a bunch of players who might be in contention for those scholarship gigs, which just goes to show how much the Wellington Phoenix Academy is doing what it says on the tin. Like, they're bringing through very good players, they're coaching them to a high degree, and they're coaching them in a way that's compatible with them going into A-League football. A lot of these guys spend a lot of time training with the first team throughout the off season and throughout the season itself. So the transition doesn't seem to be too rough, especially when you got a coach like Chiefy, who's very much about making those kind of integrations.
And of course, the dual Japanese signings got their first dose of Kiwi media, so it was cool to see. We also had the Cup finals this weekend, and you've got 2 little nuggets here that I find interesting. Auckland United, Kate Sheppard Cup final champions. Kate Sheppard Cup winners, sorry. Auckland United women have played Western Springs 4 times this season, and they have won 1-0 on every occasion. Charlotte Roach has scored the only goal in 3 of those 4 games. So shout out to her. Shout out to Auckland United, Kate Sheppard Cup champions. And your Chatham Cup note is Paul Eiffel and assistant Ikau Kwainu has won the Chatham Cup as a manager in consecutive years with a different team each time. First with Christchurch United and then with Wellington Olympic. On both occasions, his team conceded a stoppage time goal to force extra time, and then they won on penalties. So Wellington Olympic are Chatham Cup final winners. Keep wanting to say champions. Don't know if that works in the football world. And
Chatham Cup champs, yeah, why not?
And Auckland United are Kate Sheppard Cup champions, with plenty of divine alignment in those 2 performances by the looks of it.
Yeah, a little bit crazy how some of that stuff just kind of happens in this in this almost scripted pattern. The Auckland United, despite the fact that they've had these close wins against Western Springs, who are pretty, they're a National League side as well. They're a very strong team. They're good defensively. They've got a lot of good veterans in there. They make it tough. But Auckland United have gone undefeated through the whole season to this point. They are the best women's team in the country. They're reigning National League champions. They are going to be the team on the pedestal that everyone else is trying to topple when the National League kicks off in a couple of weeks. I don't necessarily see anyone beating them, but some of that might depend, because what if Chloe Knott or Saskia Vosper get another gig in the A-League or something? Some of these players might not necessarily be there. There is the Under-20 World Cup's just finished. I can't remember if Auckland United had any players in there or not, but the Western Springs did. But there is an Under-17 World Cup that will clash a little bit with this. I don't think that'll affect the sort of top line of any of the teams, but there will be players from those teams who are playing. Well, the Phoenix maybe a little bit more so than others, but there will be players from those teams who will be getting National League minutes throughout the season as well. So, this Auckland United is just a bit of a dynasty at this point. They've won everything. They won the Oceania Champions League. They won the NRFL Premiership. They won last year's National League. They've won the Kate Sheppard Cup this year. If they win the National League again, they'll have won 4 trophies, which is, I think, something that only Auckland City men have done in the past. Is I think 2022 they won all 4 of those competitions. There's the regional league, the national league, the Oceania Champions League, and the National Cup. So they're just a step above. They're a really just a stacked team full of talent. They've got players who have played at higher levels. They've also got very good young players on their way up, and a few of the players in that team that we saw in the Kate Sheppard Cup final probably quite unlucky to miss out on the Under-20 World Cup squad. Charlotte Roach would have been one of them. Alexis Cook would have been another one. Players like Renee Wasi, Danielle Canham have played age group internationals before. They've got a solid backline, players like Chelsea Elliott, Talisha Green, and Greer McIntosh, and I don't remember who played. Saskia Voss played left back, so that's not a bad addition to be able to chuck in there. They actually had Michaela Foster pop by for a couple of games during the season as well. A little bit more to stay fit ahead of the Olympics, which was probably important. It actually sounds now like she won't be going back to the Phoenix, which is what I had expected. It hasn't happened yet. And now the word is maybe she's popping over to Europe for a contract, which I find quite exciting because there is an opportunity at left back for the Football Ferns, because Ellie Riley won't be playing much longer. She might not even be playing again. And it's just a bit, there's like 4 or 5 players who've been getting left back minutes who are in contention there. Like Foster is one of them. Grace Neville's more of a right back, but she can play left back. She's playing in the English Championship with London City Lionesses. Liz Anton, who's just moved from Perth Glory to Canberra United. Who else is playing? Ellie Green is a left back playing in Denmark at the moment. Or I say playing, but she hasn't actually played yet this season. I don't know exactly what's going on there. These things don't always get reported very well, but there's 4 players right there, plus Ellie Riley, plus whoever else might be pushing through. Like you can't even fit all those players in a squad, let alone decide who's going to, like, what the pecking order might be. So how do you separate yourself from the crowd? Well, you just got to show a little bit more ambition. You got to take a bit of a risk and try get to a higher level and just like set yourself above that way. And so that's a nice ambitious move from Michaela Foster, if indeed something like that comes to pass, and we'll see where she potentially ends up. But yeah, Auckland United, very good. One other weird factoid from the Under-20, from the Kate Sheppard Cup final, is that neither coach was there. So Ben Bate coaches Auckland United. He is an assistant with the New Zealand Under-16s who are doing their Oceania qualifying at the moment. And Maya Vink coaches Western Springs, and she is the assistant for the Under-20s squad who were at the World Cup. So neither of the coaches were actually on the sideline. The assistants were taken over for both of those ones. As to the Chatham Cup, where I just mentioned Charlotte Roach did score a banger. It was a great goal, smashed it in from outside the box, late-ish as well. Like just she had a few chances that she kind of rushed earlier in the game, probably easier chances than the one she scored, but she just waited for the moment. And she's a player who she's moved up from Canterbury. I think probably to go to university in Auckland, but I'm not entirely sure. If it might just be footballing reasons. I don't know. But she's had a knack of the last couple national leagues for scoring crucial goals for Canterbury. So she just seems to be that type of striker. She might miss a few. She might look a little bit off the pace, or maybe like not quite linking up, but then she will just do something awesome and score a very important goal, which is just an outstandingly good trait to have. The Chatham Cup final, Auckland City, Wellington Olympic, the big rivalry now these days. And the thing I love about that rivalry is that because they're from different regions, they only play when it matters. There's no slippery preseason friendlies going on here. There's no There's no secondary cup stuff where no one's really interested, or there's no April league games where maybe their overseas signings haven't arrived, or they're resting their players because early in the season and who really cares? None of that. They play in the National League. They play in the late rounds of the Chatham Cup because I think it's only from the quarters onwards where you play teams outside your region anyway, in the Chatham Cup as well, where they start combining them just to make sure people aren't. You, you got to respect the travel expectations of teams there. Um, they play in Oceania Champions League qualifiers as well. Big games, lots on the line every time they meet, and they're the two best teams in the country. And Wellington Olympic have probably, after winning the last National League, after they did lose the Oceania Champions League stuff to them at the start of the year, but after winning the last National League, winning the Chatham Cup final here, they've probably put themselves just a step, maybe even only half a step, but ahead of Auckland City in terms of recent performances, recent outcomes, current quality leading into the next National League. But I mean, it was just a heavyweight clash in all regards in that game, and you got a bunch of players who everyone will know and recognize who've been following these. Core players from Auckland City, core players from Wellington Olympic, just out there doing battle as they have so many times over the last couple of years, and yeah, went all the way down to penalties. And the reason it went to penalties is because of a bloke called Stipe Ukich from Auckland City, who was the youngest player in the game, scored a 95th minute, 5th minute of added time equalizer for Auckland City to force extras. He hit the post during extra time. He had a header, also cleared off the line. He's a speedy winger who could take on defenders and, chucking a step over here or there, get past, running behind. But his three best chances in this game were headers. And that sort of, I don't know, like I'd watched him play a fair bit for the under 17s, I think, earlier this year, and Oceania stuff. Might have been the under 19s. Yeah, it would have been the under 19s and World Cup qualifying there. And yeah, I saw the speedy winger, the goal scoring type aspect. I didn't necessarily get a gauge on how. I think he's bigger than he looks. He's stronger than he looks. He's apparently just he's good in the air. He won the Jack Batty Memorial Cup thing for the best player in the final, despite being on the losing team. Although admittedly it was a draw and to have to be separated by penalties. He did score in the shootout as well, so nerves of steel as well, despite being the youngest bloke on the field. You remember last year when Ella Jerez used the Kate Sheppard Cup final as sort of like a stage to announce herself and say, "Learn my name. I'm one of the best prospects in the country." Stipe Ukich did that for Auckland City in this Chatham Cup final this year. Like, he was the young player of these two finals who was like, if you didn't know me before, you know me now, and you probably want to remember my name. He has been linked to Auckland FC earlier in their sort of recruitment process, but it sounds like he probably rebuffed them because being from Auckland City, you won't be surprised to hear he's got some Balkans kind of Mediterranean heritage. I think the name Stipe Ukich also lends itself towards Croatian. Yeah. So it sounds like he's probably gonna go when he turns 18 in January. He will go and have I think he's already done some trials, and he might go back and sign. You can't it's hard to sign professional deals before you're 18, but once you're 18, you got a little bit more control over matters there. So I think that's what's going to happen. He's not going to sign with Auckland FC. He's going to go play professionally in Europe at the start of next year. I'm just really hoping that means he sticks around for the National League. Because there would be a case to say, well, if he's got something sorted already, you don't want to risk an injury, you don't want to play too much or whatever, but also you want to get those reps in New Zealand while you can, just so that you can build that profile and just, stay fit, stay active, get some highlights, boost your reputation. He was fantastic in the Chatham Cup final, and I really hope we see a lot more of him in the National League before he heads off to the Flying Kiwis realms, which feels inevitable at this stage. He is a hell of a player.
It'll make the National League a lot more fun if you got one of the best youngsters showing out in the National League. We don't have a White Ferns squad yet, so we'll have to leave that to the same deities who have slowed down the Blackcaps test with Afghanistan. Seems to be a trend for the Blackcaps and the White Ferns. But we'll wrap up our niche cast there. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Choo choo.